You're standing at the entrance of a bar, and something inside you screams to turn around and leave. The music is pounding through the walls. You can see the crowd through the windows, people dancing, laughing, drinks flowing, everyone seemingly having the time of their lives. Your friends are already inside, waiting for you. You told them you'd come. You don't want to be that person again. The one who always cancels, the one who can't just relax and have fun like everyone else. But every cell in your body is resisting. Your chest feels tight. Your stomach is churning. There's a heaviness in the air you can't name. You look around and nobody else seems to feel it. They're all walking in excited, ready to lose themselves in the noise and chaos. So you ignore that ancient voice inside you, that knowing that's trying to protect you, and you walk in anyway. You force a smile. You order a drink. You pretend you're fine. And hours later, maybe days later, you're completely drained. Your energy is gone. Your peace is shattered. You feel like you've been pulled through something dark and you can't even explain to anyone what happened because nothing visibly bad occurred. Carl Jung understood something most people spend their entire lives ignoring. He understood that those of us who are awakening, those he called the individuating ones, the chosen ones walking the path towards psychological wholeness, possess an intuitive radar that detects toxic environments and dangerous energies long before the rational mind can process what's happening. That feeling you get when you approach certain bars, certain clubs, certain social spaces where people gather to escape themselves, that's not social anxiety. That's not you being antisocial or uptight. That's your soul recognizing a threat to your sacred journey. The problem is, we've been conditioned to override these instincts. We've been told that we should let loose, that we need to be more social, that avoiding the bar scene makes us judgmental killjoys. But Jung knew better. He understood that the psyche has its own intelligence, that certain environments are genuinely dangerous to people on the path of awakening. Today, you're going to discover 7 dangerous places that your soul instinctively avoids. And we're going to use the bar as our lens to understand these deeper patterns. Because what's happening in that bar isn't just about loud music and alcohol. It's about energetic dynamics, unconscious patterns, and spiritual dangers that exist everywhere. And by the end of this, you'll understand that trusting your instinct to avoid these places isn't weakness. It's the highest form of spiritual intelligence. The first dangerous aspect of bars that chosen ones instinctively avoid is the collective descent into unconsciousness, disguised as freedom and fun. Jung spoke about the collective unconscious, that vast shared reservoir of human experience, but there's a shadow side to collective energy, a kind of mass regression that happens when groups gather with the explicit purpose of escaping themselves. When you walk into most bars, you're not entering a space of authentic connection. You're entering a space where people have come to abandon consciousness, to drown their thoughts in alcohol, to lose themselves in noise and chaos, to escape the uncomfortable reality of their lives for a few hours. On the surface, this looks harmless, people blowing off steam. But what's actually happening is a collective agreement to regress, to abandon individual consciousness and merge into a primitive group state where nobody is really present, nobody is really connecting. Everyone is just using each other as props in their personal escape from reality. Jung called this participation mystique, a state where individual identity dissolves into the collective, where people lose their capacity for self-reflection and become vessels for archetypal energies. In this case, the Dionysian archetype of intoxication and dissolution. Chosen ones feel this immediately. Your soul recognizes that everyone inside has made an unconscious agreement to check out, and if you enter, you'll be expected to check out too. You'll be expected to drink away your awareness, to numb your sensitivity, to turn off that inner observer that Jung believed was essential for individuation. The pressure is immense. If you stay sober and conscious in a bar full of drunk people, You become a mirror that reflects their unconsciousness back to them, and they will resent you for it. They'll call you uptight, boring, no fun. What they're really saying is, stop reminding me that I'm running from myself. Your presence threatens the collective agreement to remain unconscious. The danger isn't just about alcohol. The danger is about repeatedly placing yourself in environments that require you to abandon your hard-won awareness, to regress to a less conscious state. Every time you do this, you send a message to your unconscious that your awakening doesn't matter, that your sensitivity is a burden to be numbed rather than a gift to be honored. You begin to lose contact with your soul. Your dreams become disturbed. Your intuition weakens. Jung believed that individuation requires you to differentiate yourself from the collective, to develop and maintain your individual consciousness even when surrounded by people who have abandoned theirs. You cannot do this surrounded by people who are 3 drinks deep into forgetting themselves. This doesn't mean you can never go to a bar. It means you need to be honest about what's actually happening in these spaces and whether that serves your journey. A conscious person can enter a bar and maintain their presence, but most people can't. Most people get pulled into the collective energy, start drinking even when they didn't plan to, stay later than they intended, wake up the next morning feeling contaminated. Your soul knows the difference between conscious celebration and unconscious escape. When you feel that resistance at the entrance, that's not fear. That's your psyche protecting your consciousness, refusing to participate in collective unconsciousness. The chosen ones who honor this often face harsh judgment. They're excluded, mocked, labeled as too serious. But what they're actually doing is protecting the most precious thing they have, their awakening consciousness, their connection to their soul. The second dangerous aspect is that bars become concentrated fields of projected shadow and unprocessed darkness. Jung's concept of the shadow, everything about ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, is perhaps his most important contribution. The shadow doesn't disappear when we repress it. It leaks out. It gets projected onto others. And bars become magnets for shadow projection, creating toxic energetic fields that sensitive people feel immediately. Everyone who walks through those doors is carrying their unacknowledged pain, their repressed rage, their hidden shame, their denied sexuality, their unexpressed aggression. And in the dimly lit, alcohol-fueled atmosphere, all of that shadow content comes pouring out in distorted ways. The man who would never admit he's angry gets into a fight over nothing. The woman who's suppressed her sexuality becomes aggressively sexual in ways that have nothing to do with authentic desire. The person who can't acknowledge their loneliness desperately clings to anyone who will give them attention. This is shadow acting out. People who have no conscious relationship with their darkness, so it erupts in primitive, unintegrated ways. And if you're an empath, if you're someone actually doing shadow work, you become a lightning rod for all this unprocessed energy. You walk into a bar and immediately you feel the rage simmering beneath the surface, the desperation masquerading as confidence, the predatory energy disguised as flirtation, the violence waiting to explode. Your body knows, your stomach knots, your shoulders tense. The danger is multi-layered. First, these environments can trigger your own unintegrated shadow. Second, other people will project their shadow onto you. The man who can't own his predatory sexuality will see you as prey or prude. The woman who can't acknowledge her jealousy will target you with subtle aggression. Third, you can start absorbing other people's shadow material as if it's your own. You leave feeling contaminated, carrying emotions that aren't yours. This is psychic infection. Jung said that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. These bars are full of people whose inner situations are completely unconscious, acting out destructive patterns they don't recognize. Chosen ones learn to recognize shadow-saturated fields and exit immediately, not because they're judgmental, but because they know they cannot do their own shadow work while being used as a dumping ground for everyone else's disowned darkness. The bar environment amplifies all of this because of the alcohol, the darkness, the loud music that makes real communication impossible. Your instinct to avoid this isn't antisocial behavior. It's spiritual intelligence protecting your psychological work from contamination. Right now, I want you to pause and really feel into this. Think about the last time you forced yourself into a bar when everything in you wanted to leave. What happened to your energy afterward? Comment below and write, "I trust my soul's protection." Your comment might be exactly what someone needs to hear today to finally honor their own inner knowing. Write it now. I trust my soul's protection. The third dangerous aspect is that bars are temples of spiritual bypassing disguised as spiritual experience. Jung understood the difference between genuine religious experience and counterfeit spirituality. He knew that humans have a drive toward transcendence, but he also knew this drive could be hijacked into false forms that actually prevent real growth. Walk into any bar and watch what's happening. People aren't just drinking to relax. They're engaging in a secular ritual, seeking ecstasy, which literally means to stand outside oneself. They're trying to transcend their ordinary consciousness. This is a legitimate spiritual need. The problem is they're using the wrong tools. Alcohol creates a chemically induced altered state that feels like transcendence, but is actually dissolution. You're not expanding your consciousness. You're fragmenting it. You're not connecting with something higher. You're regressing to something lower. The loud music, the flashing lights, the press of bodies, all of this creates a trance state, a collective ritual that promises transformation but delivers temporary relief at best and trauma at worst. Jung would recognize this as inflation followed by deflation. In the moment, people feel expanded, powerful, connected. The shy person becomes confident. The anxious person feels free. But it's all chemical illusion, borrowed energy that has to be paid back. The next morning brings the deflation, the hangover that's not just physical, but spiritual. The shame, the regret, the fragmentation. Chosen ones feel the falseness of this pseudo-transcendence immediately. Your soul knows the difference between authentic spiritual experience and counterfeit escape. Real transformation happens through integration, not intoxication, through consciousness, not unconsciousness, through facing yourself, not fleeing yourself. When people pressure you to drink, to let loose, what they're really asking is for you to participate in their ritual of false transcendence. Your refusal threatens them because it suggests there might be another way, a harder way, that requires facing pain rather than numbing it. Jung believed that genuine spiritual experience required preparation, a vessel strong enough to contain it. That's what psychological work does. It builds the container. The bar offers instant transcendence with no preparation required. And that's exactly why it's dangerous. It's spiritual fast food that leaves you more malnourished than before. When your soul says, "This is not your temple, this is not your path to transcendence," trust that knowing. The fourth dangerous aspect is that bars require you to make yourself small, to dim your light, to suppress your authentic presence to fit the environment. Jung understood that individuation is inherently disruptive to unconscious collective spaces. When you're truly present, truly in your power, you disturb the field. Walk into a bar as a fully conscious, sober, present person and watch what happens. You'll feel immediate pressure to conform, lower your consciousness, raise your voice. Perform enthusiasm, pretend the music isn't too loud. Act like shallow conversations are fascinating. Tolerate behaviors that violate your boundaries. Make yourself smaller so everyone else can stay comfortable in their unconsciousness. Chosen ones feel this pressure intensely, and it's suffocating. Your natural state is presence, awareness, authenticity, but the bar environment punishes all of that. If you're too present, you're called intense. If you're too aware, you're uptight. If you're too authentic, you're weird. The unspoken rule is clear: abandon your true self at the door, or you don't belong here. This is soul murder. Every time you compress your natural energy to fit into an environment that's too small for you, you send a devastating message to your unconscious. You tell yourself that your authentic presence is too much, that your gifts are burdensome, that you need to apologize for your existence. Women feel this particularly acutely in bar environments. You're being evaluated, objectified, reduced to your physical appearance and sexual availability, your intelligence, your depth, your spiritual awareness. None of that matters. You learn to dumb yourself down, to perform a version of femininity that's palatable, to tolerate boundary violations. But men experience this too. The sensitive man walks into a bar and feels pressure to perform toxic masculinity, to be aggressive, competitive, to objectify women. His gentleness is mocked. His depth is dismissed. Jung spoke about the persona, the mask we wear to interface with the social world. A healthy persona is flexible. But in bar environments, the persona becomes a prison. You're not adapting. You're abandoning yourself completely. You start to forget who you really are. You internalize the message that your full presence is unacceptable. You develop shame around your gifts. The danger multiplies because these environments don't just ask you to dim your light temporarily. They actively feed on your light. The unconscious people around you will drain your energy to fuel their escape. You'll leave feeling exhausted, depleted, confused about why a few hours left you feeling like you've been through a war. Chosen ones who honor their instinct to avoid these diminishing environments often face intense social consequences. They're excluded, called antisocial, accused of thinking they're better than everyone. But what they're actually doing is refusing to participate in collective self-abandonment. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But you cannot become who you truly are while constantly inhabiting spaces that require you to be someone else. The fifth dangerous aspect is that bars breed victim consciousness and learned helplessness disguised as connection and commiseration. Jung understood that the victim archetype, when activated unconsciously, becomes one of the most destructive patterns. It traps people in perpetual powerlessness, where suffering becomes identity and change becomes impossible. Pay attention to conversations in bars as the night wears on. Listen to what people are actually talking about. They're bonding over complaints, rehearsing grievances, competing over who has it worse, commiserating about terrible bosses, difficult relationships, unfair circumstances. And there's a strange energy to these conversations, a perverse pleasure in shared suffering, a comfort in the collective agreement that we're all victims of forces beyond our control. On the surface, this looks like empathy, but look deeper and you see people reinforcing each other's powerlessness, validating each other's stuckness, creating a collective agreement that change is impossible. Nobody is talking about what they're doing to change their situation. Nobody is taking responsibility. Nobody is discussing growth or transformation, because the moment someone does, they become a threat to the collective victim bond. Jung was clear that healing requires moving from unconscious suffering to conscious integration, from identifying as victims to recognizing ourselves as participants in our lives with agency and choice. Bar culture actively prevents this transformation. The bonding that happens over drinks is often bonding over wounds, connection through shared victimhood. And if you're committed to growth, who believes in agency and transformation, you'll feel profoundly alienated. You'll try to shift the conversation toward possibility, and you'll watch people's eyes glaze over because they don't actually want solutions. They want validation for staying stuck. Chosen ones feel this dynamic, and it's repulsive to their soul. Not because they lack compassion, but because they know true compassion challenges people to grow, not enables them to stay wounded. The danger is that these environments are addictive. There's comfort in collective helplessness. It absolves you of the responsibility of changing your life, but it also keeps you trapped in patterns you could break. Jung believed that neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. Bar culture is full of substitute suffering. Endless rehearsal of wounds without movement toward healing. When you feel resistance to joining friends for drinks, when you sense these bonding sessions over complaints are actually toxic, trust that perception. Your soul knows your purpose isn't to rehearse your victim story until you die. Your purpose is to transform your suffering into wisdom. The sixth dangerous aspect is that bars are performance stages for false enlightenment and premature transcendence, for spiritual materialism and ego inflation disguised as freedom. Jung warned extensively about inflation, the ego's identification with archetypal energies before necessary groundwork has been done, and bars are theaters where this inflation performs itself every night. Watch the drunk person late in the evening who suddenly becomes a philosopher, declaring profound truths with absolute certainty. Watch the person who's had 3 drinks and now they're the most confident, most charismatic version of themselves. Watch people who claim they're only truly free, only truly themselves when intoxicated, that sobriety is repression and drinking is liberation. This is inflation, the ego borrowing power from altered states and claiming it as personal development. What they're experiencing isn't authentic expansion of consciousness. It's temporary dissolution of the ego's boundaries through chemical means. And they're mistaking the relief of that dissolution for genuine spiritual attainment. Jung would recognize this as inflation that precedes inevitable deflation, because borrowed power always has to be returned. Chemical courage isn't real courage. Alcohol-induced authenticity isn't real authenticity. It's all cosplay, all temporary masks that will be ripped away when sobriety returns. The danger is that people become addicted to this inflated state. They start to believe this is who they really are, that their sober self is false and their drunk self is true. They organize their entire life around accessing this false transcendence. Chosen ones see through this immediately. You watch people claim they're being authentic while actually abandoning themselves. You see them confuse chemical disinhibition with spiritual liberation. Your soul knows the difference. Real confidence comes from genuine self-knowledge and integration. Real authenticity emerges from years of shadow work. Real freedom is the capacity to be fully yourself without any substances. The bar offers a shortcut that isn't actually a shortcut. It's a detour that leads nowhere. Jung believed genuine spiritual development required building a strong container, a psyche capable of holding expanded states without fragmenting. But bar culture bypasses all that. It offers instant expansion with no container, no preparation, no integration. And the result is chaos. When you feel resistance to participating in this false enlightenment theater, trust that discernment. You're protecting yourself from spiritual bypassing that our culture has normalized. If this content is resonating with you, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. What we're building here is a community of people committed to consciousness over comfort, to authentic growth over social performance. Your subscription helps this message reach other chosen ones who think something is wrong with them because they don't want to spend Friday nights in bars. The seventh dangerous aspect is that bar culture demands certainty about meaninglessness and punishes anyone who seeks deeper mystery and purpose. Jung spent his life exploring where psychology meets spirituality, where the rational mind encounters the numinous. He understood that comfort with mystery, with not knowing, with remaining open to the sacred dimensions of existence, is essential for authentic development. But walk into a bar and listen to the underlying philosophy. It's nihilism disguised as sophistication. It's the certainty that nothing really matters, so we might as well drink and hook up and distract ourselves until we die. It's the mocking of anyone who suggests there might be meaning or purpose or something sacred worth protecting. There's a strange aggression toward mystery in bar culture. If you mention God or soul or purpose, you're met with eye rolls and condescension. The implicit message is that we're all just meaningless accidents, and anyone who thinks otherwise is naive. This isn't intellectual sophistication. It's existential cowardice disguised as realism. It's people so terrified of the vulnerability required to engage with mystery that they've collapsed into defensive cynicism. Jung understood this defense mechanism. He saw patients who used intellectual skepticism to avoid the terrifying encounter with the numinous, who dismissed the reality of the soul, because acknowledging it would require them to completely reorganize their lives. Chosen ones who are living in relationship with mystery, who have had experiences that defy rational explanation, who sense they're part of something larger, these people feel profoundly alienated in bar environments. You try to have a real conversation about meaning or spirituality, and you're met with dismissal or mockery. You're told to lighten up, to have another drink, to stop being so serious. The danger is that if you spend enough time in these meaning-denying environments, you start to doubt your own experiences. You start to wonder if maybe they're right. This doubt can be devastating because it cuts you off from the very source of meaning that makes your life worth living. Our culture trains people to be comfortable with meaninglessness, to accept that life is just random events with no larger pattern or purpose. And anyone who resists this training becomes a threat to the collective agreement to remain cynical. Chosen ones can't participate in this agreement. Your entire journey is predicated on the certainty that meaning exists, that you have a sacred purpose. This doesn't mean you have all the answers. True relationship with mystery requires profound humility. But there's a difference between not knowing the answers and declaring there are no answers. Your soul lives in the former space. Bar culture lives in the latter. When you feel profound discomfort in environments where people have collectively agreed that nothing matters, trust that knowing. You cannot nurture your connection to mystery while surrounded by people who mock its existence. Jung said, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it." And one of the most important things we must accept is that existence contains irreducible mystery, that we're part of something larger than ourselves. Bar culture rejects all of this in favor of defended, cynical certainty about meaninglessness. And your soul knows it cannot survive in that atmosphere. So here is what all 7 of these dangerous aspects have in common. Every single one requires you to betray your soul in some fundamental way. They ask you to abandon consciousness for unconsciousness, to ignore shadow for false peace, to accept counterfeit transcendence instead of real growth, to make yourself small, to bond through victimhood instead of empowerment, to mistake inflation for development, and to accept cynical meaninglessness instead of remaining open to mystery. And your soul cannot participate in any of these betrayals without suffering profound damage. This is why chosen ones must learn to trust their instincts about environments. When you stand at the entrance of that bar and every cell says, "Don't go in," that's not social anxiety. That's your soul's sophisticated warning system protecting your sacred journey. The modern world will tell you to override this instinct, to be more social, to loosen up. But Jung would tell you that your first responsibility is to your own individuation, to becoming who you truly are. And you cannot do that while constantly exposing yourself to environments that require your self-abandonment. The good news is that as you learn to honor these instincts, as you become ruthlessly selective about where you place your energy, you create space for authentic connection and community to emerge. You find your true soul family, people who don't require you to be unconscious or small or victimized or meaningless. You discover that real celebration doesn't require intoxication, that real connection doesn't happen in loud spaces where nobody can actually hear each other, that real freedom comes from consciousness, not escape. This is the path of the chosen one. Not chosen because you're special, but chosen because you've said yes to the most difficult journey a human can undertake, the journey toward wholeness that Jung called individuation. And on this journey, wisdom isn't just about knowing where to go. It's about knowing where not to go. It's about trusting that ancient voice that's been trying to guide you since birth. So the next time you're standing at the entrance of a bar and you feel that inexplicable resistance, don't ignore it. Don't rationalize it away. Don't force yourself to enter. Honor it. Thank your soul for protecting you. Turn around and walk toward spaces that allow you to breathe, to be present, to remain conscious, to cultivate meaning. This is how chosen ones navigate a world that's hostile to consciousness, not with rigid rules, but with profound trust in the wisdom that lives in their bones, in their gut, in that quiet voice that speaks when everything else is silent. Listen to that voice. It knows the way home, and home isn't in the bar, it's in your soul.